record. Boom. And that is that. Where are we? You hear me okay?
Crystal.
Perfect. Perfect. All right. Well, hello, everyone. We're here again on Inside the Kingdom. I am Alex, your host, joined by the talented, amazing Dan Schkade, the force behind Flash Gordon, and the reinvigoration, if that's even a word. Flash Gordon on Comics Kingdom and across newspapers nationwide. Yeah, obviously syndicated everywhere. Dan comes to us, storied cartoonist, Eisner-nominee, Ringo Award nominee on all his work. You've probably seen it on Webtoon and Lavender Jack, and obviously now with Flash Gordon. But yeah, Dan, so happy to see you. So happy to have you here again. It's always a good time to talk, and especially to talk Flash Gordon.
I'm really happy to be here. And frankly, I love the word reinvigorate because not only, does it mean to, put fresh life into something, but it literally means to infuse with vigor. And that's just it's like hitting the nos on something. I love that word.
Thank you. It was great that it popped up because that's exactly how we feel, and not only us here internally at King, but the fans feel about your work with Flash Gordon. I've seen some of the commentaries like, "Is there a collected volume coming soon?" I can't speak to that, but I think that'd be really cool. I think we all think that would be really cool, and deservedly so. Again, kudos to you. You're just amazing at this stuff.
Thank you so much. And I'm right there with them. And every time I see that, you know, I'm an only child, and I'm the kind of only child that was trying to like please everybody. And so whenever I see that, it's a mixture of like, no, I have to disappoint this person, but then there's also the like, well, I wouldn't be in a position to disappoint them if they didn't really connect with the work.
That's right.
So
That's right.
I try to take that side.
That's a great way to look at it. Yeah, yeah, it's true. You do have the disappointment a bit because we can't just say yes or like here's a link and push them a link online, right? The way
Right.
everything is kind of a follow me and subscribe, that sort of stuff. But needless to say, I hope we can delight those audiences sooner than later, right? With
Yeah.
something like that. Fingers crossed. Yeah, exactly. So Dan, let's jump right into it. I know our audiences are familiar with Flash, his storied history. Flash is 92. Am I correct about that?
They'll be
92?
92 in January.
January, he will be 92, which is, very young these days, and
Just hitting his stride.
just hitting his stride. I do feel that way with how you've injected life and energy into Flash, and this run, right, of Flash Gordon and what you've done with it and all the myriad of storylines that you've told within this strip. It's our traditional newspaper, left to right, four-panel strip with a Sunday half standard, right? And is that a eight panels Sunday, right?
Yeah. It's seven to eight. Sometimes I go for a nice sprawling vista with that top panel.
Yeah,
Um, but it's definitely it's just few enough panels that that it's a challenge to summarize the story, but it's enough to hit the high notes, which is very focusing as a writer because I have to do the Sundays first.
yes. And for those that aren't familiar, one of the things that I really love about how you storytell, and speaking about the Sundays specifically, the Sundays are your recaps to your dailies, and I think that that's so well received. It's an old style of storytelling that isn't too familiar these days because everything is so episodic, right, and condensed in that way. So it's nice to have that catch up and then continue, or just pop in, But it's really good storytelling. I love it.
Well, that was one of my first conversations with T, and I think with you as well was how I didn't realize that the Sundays were sometimes separate. I didn't realize that
Right.
some papers only get the Sundays or don't get the Sundays or only get the bottom two rows of the Sundays. And once you guys told me that, the idea of that Sundays not just being a summary but being a recontextualization from a particular character's perspective seemed really exciting to me because Flash Gordon, even if I never introduced a single new character, it would still be a cast of dozens, and you can only give so much of their perspective in the dailies. And so having a Sunday where we can something as simple as like find out what adjectives they use for people or like what the cadence of their speech is, little bits of bitterness or little bits of affection, like it just helps I feel like make the world feel fuller in a way that doesn't sacrifice our momentum.
Yeah, yeah, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think I've seen the reaction to that that recap ish, and it's not just a standard panel recap. I love how you kind of narrate it, and
Mm.
it's just a good old heartwarming kind of like callback again to, in my opinion, is the Saturday morning cartoons, and you get that little recap period and stuff. I just love it, right? Again, and not only I think again testament to its success on the site and across. It's well received. So good
Well,
idea.
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, so much of what we do on Flash Gordon is it does harken back to earlier traditions because Flash Gordon is an
that's right.
earlier tradition. You know, Flash Gordon predates Star Wars, Superman, predates well, not Buck Rogers, famously not Buck Rogers, but he predates so much of what we have in what I like to call spandex sci-fi.
Yeah,
It originates from this, and so I feel like uh, while other people have done really good work,
yeah.
really reinventing the wheel on the character in modern interpretations, I'm famously a big fan of the '90s cartoon where he
Hmm.
had like a crop top and a skateboard. But for our version, mining those classic comic strip traditions, those classic comic book traditions, is a very mindful goal, and I feel like it's working for us.
I do too. I mean, to your point, we have your rendition of Flash Gordon. We're also working with Matt Cave, great partners of ours, on what they're doing in traditional floppy and graphic novel. And then yeah, we still have our 80s, 90s cartoons, and we run them on YouTube daily. Shout out to YouTube
Yeah,
Comics Kingdom. You can go watch the whole library of Flash Gordon adventures on online. And yeah, those styles do. Uh, um, there's a bit of juxtaposition in all of them, but at its core, we
yeah.
still have our swashbuckling hero who's, in the famous at this point 80s line, quarterback New York Jets, right? And it's
Hmm.
Flash Gordon, and he still have no Queen shirts all over the place, but we have Flash everywhere. Um, can we
Somebody
talk?
said
Oh, go ahead, go ahead.
somebody said the Mad Cave is Zack Snyder's Flash Gordon, and the newspaper strips is the Cowboy Bebop Flash Gordon.
I like that. I like that a
Yeah,
lot.
I'm not mad at that at all. I
I'm
like
not
that.
mad at that at all either. That's the first time I'm hearing that. I'm gonna keep that internally. I'm gonna sit there and just ruminate on that and see what we do because that's actually, yeah, that I love that. I love we have a Snyderverse. Before we move off of the origins here, I do want to dig in on that a little bit because it was a bit irregular. I do remember, and shout out again to T Owner, who's congrats on her role now at Boom Studios. Was previously with us at King, who helped bring in Dan Schkade and obviously bring this to life with Flash Gordon again.
Uh, the God, the Vision, huge fan of T,
Yeah,
preceding this and absolutely succeeding it.
correct, absolutely. Can we talk about that at first? Because to my understanding, you pitched us on a legacy strip. And it wasn't necessarily Flash in the beginning. I think it was Rip Kirby, right?
That's right. Yeah, I was wrapping up my webtoon Lavender Jack.
Yep.
I've been doing it for 4 years, and I knew it was going to end with the third season. Um, and so I was kind of looking for the next place to land, and I thought, well, I've developed a kind of peculiar skill set of doing long form weekly
Right.
scrolling comics. Like
Hmm.
it's a niche that not a lot of other cartoonists, not certainly not the majority of other cartoonists have worked in. Uh, such that you can just put out a casting call and get a bunch. And so I had met T. We had met through mutual friends. I was part of Helioscope back in Portland, this comic studio, and so there's a huge amount of cross pollination there. Um, I reached out to T, um, who had previously tagged me to do one of the Flash Forward strips, the anthology Flash Gordon
Hmm.
strip, which had I was sandwiched in between Kel McDonald and Dennis Kitchen, like fantastic talent on that production. But yeah, I emailed T and I said, all right, I'm looking to make a move. I think my line was, if you're looking for somebody to show Rip Kirby how to use Instagram, like you have my number. Um, and T responded with some positive noises, and then a couple months later, I got an email saying, "Hey, there actually is something opening up that we might like you to try out for. Can you get on the phone?" And I was thinking, all right, apartment 3G, I'm coming for you. So when I found out it was Flash Gordon, I was very, very surprised by that, and it was so different from anything I'd done before, and so different from what I was thinking of doing next. I mean, I just come off of a detective strip set in
Yep.
the early 1900s, so um, the obviously there's a factor of intimidation when it comes to approaching a storied property like Flash Gordon, but there's also the kind of exciting narrative challenge of that. Like, how do I take all this stuff that I've learned with like drawing room detective stories and put it on a rocket ship? So I was stoked. So I immediately started pouring through these PDF archives T sent me of the first I think 9 years of the strip, and just formulating my take.
Oh, that's a great I guess way that progressed. I remember the early conversations and concepts because T obviously took some leave while she was here, and I stepped in, and that was my first introduction to your work.
Oh
Which
wow.
forgive me, I hadn't seen Lavender Jack prior to that. Um, and I started combing through that and your socials, and I saw the work you did on the shadow and obviously the spirit and everything else.
Hmm.
And it, like we said, obviously off call, but I was like, here. I was like, this is our guy. Like he has it. He knows what he's doing. He has this. Like, he has it. And your shadow work, I'm really drawn to your shadow work more than even the color lines and everything you do there. The way you place thing and add context to your images in your shadow work, that's what I fall in love with. And really, I'm not gonna say it's why everyone has fallen in love with it, but it's what makes this so striking and so beautiful in my opinion. And so. Again, yeah, I was like, we found our guy. I was so happy, and then the rest has been the rest.
Man, I'm pretty happy myself, I gotta say. Um, yeah, no, I I was very flattered, very encouraged um, by the tenor of the conversations I was having with you
Yep.
guys early on. It was very clear that you all wanted something that honored this property, but also something that introduced it to new audiences where they were, as opposed to saying this is the most important thing ever. Like, you have to like it because it's Flash Gordon.
Right.
Um, and I don't think it needs that. I think it's cool already, and
Right.
you just need somebody to present it flat. I mean, while we were producing this, while we were you know uh, uh, pre-producing this, the the most recent Superman cartoon came out, My Adventures with Superman, and I'm honestly not a big cartoon guy,
Yeah.
but I knew some people who were working on it, and so I gave it a shot, and I was just so taken by how it was taking the Superman mythology, which can sometimes be presented in kind of a portentous way,
Yeah.
and presenting it as just, I mean, this guy doesn't know he's Superman. He's just Clark.
Yeah.
He's trying to make rent, and then becoming a hero throughout that. And that really focused what I wanted to do with Flash.
Yeah.
Is it's almost like there's always days to save. There's always, like, conspiracies to unravel. We don't have time to think about our legacies.
That's a
So
that's
I felt like it was part of a moment where a lot of people were approaching properties that way, which I found very exciting.
that's a great call out and great note because just quick tangent here. I'm super excited for the new Superman movie. I think Gunn nails that same idea. Like this guy doesn't know he's Superman. Like he's learning that
Yeah,
he's Clark and he can do things, right? And exactly that positioning that you took with Flash. Actually, that was actually a perfect segue. I remember your first concepts and obviously the storyline beats that we went through. But I remember the magic really happening when we saw the first Sunday, which is kind of like where you kicked off, and you went straight into Ming. Like we're
yeah.
picking up from Ming. Like it's not retelling Flash for anyone. We're gonna introduce you to Flash, but we're picking up from Ming. Can you talk about that a little bit? What was that process, thought, story? Like where did that come off? Where that inspiration coming from?
And that's Ming. Ming was brought up in the very very first conversation about this, because Ming is kind of both Flash Gordon as a property, as a comic, it's kind of its greatest asset and its greatest liability, because there have been different, you know,
Mm-hmm.
presentations of him over the years to sort of varying degrees of success.
Mm-hmm.
But he's the villain. The Emperor from Star Wars is called the Emperor because he's Emperor Ming. Like,
Yeah.
it's insanely influential character. And so I thought, let's take some time with this guy. Like, let's make him scary. Let's not make
Yeah.
him a comedy bad guy. Let's not make him like a friendly foil. Let's make this guy the devil.
Yeah.
But let's see him and then take him off the board for a while and like build up his mystique and learn about him through how other people talk about him, how other people remember him. I mean, we're almost 2 years through the strip, and most of the images of Ming we've seen have been statues of him.
Yeah.
There's this legacy of him that haunts the strip, and I figured that was a way. That was a way just to free the strip a little bit from the shackles of always having to confront Ming,
Yeah.
without having to sacrifice the presence of him, if that makes sense. And I just really liked how it took away this element that a lot of Flash Gordon stories have, because a lot of them start with the three humans arriving on Mongo.
Mm-hmm.
They make allies, they overthrow Ming, and the overthrow of Ming is generally the end of the story.
Yeah.
Obviously, the original strips went on for many years after that, but they always kind of go back to Mongo. But they have to assemble these allies in the first place. We're talking kings and queens and princes and regents of different opposing nations. Almost all these characters start out as villains. And so I thought, okay, well, once Ming's gone and there's no more like ultimate evil to unite against, they're going to fall back into that. They're going to fall back into territorialism.
Yep.
And backbiting and recrimination, and some of them wouldn't. Some of them would stay high-minded. And I thought that was so interesting, to take the classic, Flash Gordon team and just see them kind of turn on each other, but also see how that reveals their character, as opposed to a way that hopefully tears them down.
I love that, because I still, and we'll put it up here for everyone that sees this on YouTube. You can see the original rendition of like your Ming and the half-shadowed green eye, kind of like battle scarred. But I love this idea and where you've gone with this strip continuously in keeping him as exactly that, an aura, someone that is a terror, and everyone speaks to why he is, right? But
Yeah.
there is this, I love that you've picked up the story beyond Ming, and he's still he's still going on. So audiences that are listening and watching alone, Ming's around. Just going through the rest of these, and I love the rendition you had of Prince Baron, where you're going with Baron in this, through this whole thing. The way he's played along as ally and adversary, even throughout the whole thing. But one key character, which I know we talked about pre-call, I'm going to bring it up now, which I'm really, really, really happy and excited for, or have been, I should say, is the Margrave and that introduction. So, for fans that, without spoiling, for fans that have read already, you get the reveal. But can you talk through the Margrave's place in this, and I guess maybe even your inspiration for introducing that character?
Okay, yeah. So the Margrave, and we aren't saying who he is.
I'm sorry?
Are we saying or not saying who he is? Like, under the hood.
Let's not so that
Okay,
people can
cool.
go back and read it, because it's fairly recent.
It is, yeah. So the Margrave is introduced in the storyline that we call The Caves Have Eyes, which is our Kira storyline. Kira is the cave kingdom of Mongo, and it is it's underground. It's very like gothic and hellish and fantasy inspired. Even in the original fiction, like in the original Alex Raymond years, because Kira first showed up in 1935, barely over a year into the strip. It is said as a nation that nobody ever conquered. Ming never conquered this place, and it's presided over by the witch queen Azura, who is one of the most iconic of the Flash Gordon villains, I suppose. She's she's Maleficent, she's the Enchantress, she's the Queen of the Damned. She is like so many wicked like femme fatale characters all in one. And she has this really iconic early story where she sort of ensorcels Flash. She takes his memory and makes him kind of her regent, her prince soldier. So it's just a really heavy story. If they had made in the 80s, if they'd made Flash Gordon 2, if they made another, it probably would have been the Kira story. Anyway, so I wanted to go back into this cave, and I wanted to shake up the board a little bit. Yeah. And that meant I knew I wanted to introduce a new heavy for the characters that they hadn't encountered before. And so I love the idea of Azura, who is, a very mystical presence. She's got a physical presence as well, but it's mainly like holding your hand like this while, right. Tendrils pop out. So I wanted her to have essentially a Darth Vader. I wanted her to have like a tanky, really hard to beat, a henchman who was also smart, who was intimidating in his own right. Oh, because that's the thing. Like Flash and Bach, who he shares the scene with, Bach the Dragon Man, are both combat characters, and that's sort of their utility on the team. Is you can kind of throw them into anything, and all things being equal, they're going to win the fight. And so that's the other thing. I wanted them to just get washed by somebody, and that it was, and it takes them a couple weeks to kind of lick their wounds from that, because the Margrave doesn't just beat them and then Pokemon trainer style they go their separate ways. Like he knocks Flash and Bach into this like abyssal pit that it takes them like almost a month of real time to get out of. So I was really happy that people responded to the Margrave, because I think he's very cool.
Yeah, I mean, our team, the minute I came across a strip, as we browse strips for things that we want to promote online, etc., that was like our key art. And I was like, I'm not even gonna mess with it. I needed to go panel by panel and have everyone just feel that, and the audiences did, like literally kick to Flash's face. Right? they felt all of that online. It was really, really good, nice. And really fun to see. Again, just a testament to the storytelling there. I know we're speed running here a bit, but I guess synonymous with kind of like what you've been doing with Flash, is kind of speed running storylines and going through, and the pacing is so well paced. It never feels too fast, never feels too slow. But can you expand on that process, maybe in that pacing? Like, what is it that you take into account, if there's anything there that you do take into account? Is this just free balling stories that are like, I have to tell it this way?
Oh man, well, it's with Flash Gordon. In my original pitch for it, I had some macros for what I was shooting for with the strip. For instance, one of them was I wanted costume changes a lot. I wanted people's suits to get ripped up, because that's part of. I love the rips. Yeah, right. And it adds a sense of momentum, and momentum was the number one thing. I think I said, it's not Meditations in a Lonesome Universe Gordon, it's Flash Gordon. Yeah. And part of that was, when I was told we were doing 10-week story arcs, I was like, okay, every story arc is going to be in a new location. It's going to be new characters, a new story. And we might revisit characters we've seen before. Yeah. Like in the first and fifth arcs of our first year, we revisit the new character Bones Malock. We go back to the capital city. Like we reuse locations, but we never do the same thing twice in a row. Yeah. And yeah, that's a lot of, we burn through a lot of concepts, and there's been some storylines where I've thought maybe we could have lingered on this a little more, or saved this character for another thing. But I mean, it's not like we're running out of original Alex Raymond and characters, and it's also not like I'm running out of character ideas. Like whenever we go to a new location, like we'll be walking through like a laboratory, and there'll be like goggle guys cleaning test tubes. I'm like, what's that guy's story? What's he like? Is he fighting with his wife? Let's find out. Because this world is kind of endlessly lush. And and it hits this beautiful kind of allegorical ground that Alex Raymond and Don Moore hit early on, was that it's essentially the real world. Like it's kind of Futurama almost.
Yeah.
It's not in the future, but it is a world that's kind of parallel with ours. It has all the stuff that our world has. It's just a kind of science fictionalized version of it.
Yeah.
And so, as long as I keep having things about the real world that interest me, there's going to be Flash Gordon stories.
Well, there's no shortage of that stuff, right? I mean, you pick up Twitter at any given point, or X, I guess, at any given point, and you'll have anything you want to put on.
My hope is that I want the strip to have substance, to have currency with real things that are happening.
Yeah.
But not in a way like I want it to be diverting. I want it to be a thing in the newspaper or on your news feed.
Right.
That gives you some, it's exciting, gives you some spectacle or an interesting concept, interesting character beat that kind of gives you some energy to approach the world. Not a total fantasy away from it, just like a nice additive to it. As opposed to
just piggybacking off of that, I love how you approach that. What's current, but this is a departure. Comics are a departure.
Yeah.
They're meant to be that, right? And so the fact that you do that already just consciously, it's amazing, right? And then in your characters, and this is a segue into that, specifically, I feel like you tackle a lot of like moral gray zones with Bach.
Mm-hmm.
I guess without revealing too much, because I do want readers to go in who haven't, and if you have already, I'm so happy that you've been able to enjoy this. But if you haven't, go into it and you'll see for yourself. I guess what's the thought process, or how do you view Bach himself? Because he's so much of this. I talked about Baron, but I see him as like Flash and Bach. Like, this is that kind of series in a way.
Yeah, Bach goes all the way back to the beginning. The Flash forward strip that I initially did, just the one-off strip, was Flash fighting a dragon man, which is Bach's species, and it was from the dragon man's perspective. I was inspired by watching the original Buster Crabbe serials. In the first episode, Flash has to fight these hairy, goony guys that come out of like gladiatorial pits, and I just thought, what was that guy's day like before that door opened? So when I was asked back to try out for the full strip, I thought, all right, well, let's build upon that idea. Let's make a character that kind of hits those same beats, and give, on some level, an everyman character to the strip, because Flash is like this perfect hero man, and Dr. Zarkov is a rocket scientist, and Dale is also an everyman character, but she's not from that planet. She's not from Mongo. So, there's always going to be an element of her that's exotic to this location. So I wanted a native Mongoth. I wanted, and somebody that wasn't a king, somebody who, when we meet him, he's been in a like subterranean supermax for 6 years. And one thing I changed from my initial strip, where it was just a gladiator that Flash was meeting, I made him a Ming foot soldier that was part of a failed revolt against Ming. That he was part of a Dragon Man revolt that ended in all of his comrades, all of his unit killed, and him imprisoned. So when we meet him, he's almost kind of a failed Flash Gordon in a way, like somebody who is like a very physical, very capable character, who had the bravery to try and fight for freedom and just got squashed. And he's in this like depression cave when we first meet him, and I think something that a lot of people can relate to on some level or another is having events happen in your life that make you feel worthless, and that's where Bach is. And so Flash, who he meets as an opponent in like a fighting ring in this prison. Um, to have Flash not just talk to him like a man, but also help him escape and like insist upon his escape.
Yeah.
Bach doesn't want to at first; he wants to stay behind, and Flash, essentially says like invest in yourself, man, gamble on yourself. Like let's why not try caring and it's and Bach, his heart like softens a little bit and essentially like I'm ready to have my heart broken again. And so to have that character who's coming back from a really dark place, but also not a character who wallows. Like
Yeah.
he's literally a blue collar character, and I don't know. I just really liked the chemistry that he brought. I like that Flash has a gym buddy essentially, um, and he's able to give a commentary the other characters can't. So yeah, I obviously because I just talked about him for 15 minutes. I love Bach.
Yeah, Bach is near and dear as well. I love how you introduce these characters. So I'm going to move into the current storyline a bit. But before I do, I want to segue into, I guess, a broader question, which you teased a little bit. And that's obviously Alex Raymond. And I know we talked about pacing, but how has that been paying respect to Alex Raymond's universe, character, and then transitioning into your modern pacing and storytelling prose and introducing characters? How's that been for you? And in this whole experience?
I mean, it's been really interesting. When I first broke into comics about 11 years ago, it was my first full-time comics gig was drawing Will Eisner's The Spirit
The
for
spirit.
Dynamite, and with Matt Wagner writing and Brennan Wagner coloring. And I'd been a Will Eisner fan before, really inspired by his storytelling. And so during that year on The Spirit, I was consuming his old Spirit comics and also his later stuff like Contract with God and The Plot. So I was really immersing myself in that creative language, and that's all over Lavender Jack as well. But when I approached Flash Gordon, I was like, well, it's a different kind of comic. It's a different language. It's informed by Eisner because Eisner informs Kirby, Kirby informs Bruce Timm, Bruce Timm informs me. Like there's a legacy there. But Raymond his work was naturalistic. It was he was a brilliant anatomist. Uh, he was great at creating these like friezes, literally like incredibly statuesque work. And so I thought, all right, I can't do that. I'm not I didn't go to art school. I can't do that. But I thought, let's move in that direction. Let's move away from some of the outwardly cartoony techniques that I used on The Spirit. You know, people getting mad and their hats pop off their heads, or stuff that's when cars drive, they're a little bit off the ground. Like let's tone that down and focus on creating sort of frozen moments.
Yeah.
And that's whenever I'm working, I always have one of the Checker Flash Gordon collections out,
Yeah.
just open next to me. I've got the great Mad Cave collection here.
Yeah.
I have a collection of I've got a big stack of books that I kind of cycle through. And so for me, that's how I do most of the honoring. I assume that Raymond was onto something back then, and so I start from what he had, what he did, and then I innovate on it from there. I adapt it to the modern audience from there. But I just think I don't think there's anything that lasts this long without having something almost metaphysically valuable at its heart.
Yeah.
So that's how I approach it.
Oh, that's great, man. Going from there, you're absolutely right. Like he did master still moments, and you see that in like Rip Kirby as well, and camera work Like the way the scenes were depicted, it wasn't traditional, just 2D planes, etc. What you would think a simplistic, newspaper strip would be or a gag comic. It was so different then and different now still, right? That style is very, very different. Transitioning from there to where you take your stills now and you go through their Sundays, and we talked through that, the Sundays and the dailies, and how they match together into the storyline technique. And when you introduce new characters, and this is moving into the current thread where we have Etta,
Mhm.
which is she's a mechanic, correct?
That's right.
All right, so Etta the mechanic, and one thing that Raymond, I would say, this isn't a critique, but this is where you've built on that legacy is you've touched on this before. You've introduced a lot of working class voices into Flash Gordon. I don't know why I just blanked there for a second, right? I was gonna say the Ming for some reason. I don't know why the Ming came to mind, but into Flash Gordon, and I guess where does that background or that storytelling technique or inspiration come from that you want to inject into here?
Hmm.
Which you've done a bang up job of doing, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you
Talked
very
about
much.
Bach. We're talking about Etta, even the Margrave to some extent. These are all um, not autocratic voices. They're all middle class, working class, and maybe you can expand on that background. And I love where you go with them. And again, bringing life to Mongo and everywhere we are in these universes.
Well, I'm sure some of that does trail back to Eisner, to his wonderful working class stories, and on the Spirit, which was ostensibly a mass detective story. He would have spirit stories that are about like there's one that's from the perspective of like a guy that pastes up political placards and like his role in a crime story. So like some of it is that, and a lot of it is just my own life. I mean, my dad, David Schkade, was a pretty well renowned behavioral economist. He studied sort of the sociological impacts of the economy, and so I would have professors over at my house growing up. Some of these guys are like Nobel Prize winning
Oh, wow.
economists and statisticians, and so I would go with him to some of these conferences, and it's not like we grew up super rich or anything, but I was definitely upper middle class, and so I
Hmm.
and I got to meet like before I was 10, I got to meet millionaires, and I got to see that side of life. But then also, I enter my 20s, and I am flat broke. I'm working. I'm showing up at 2 a.m. to work warehouse jobs. I'm like taking sketchy side gigs to make rent. I started smoking for a while just so I
Yeah.
could like talk to some of the like to get some human connection in some of these jobs.
I love the
Um,
idea of just like hate smoking, right? Just like
uh,
just to hang out. Right?
just trying to get like a guy with 9 fingers named Pilar to talk to me. Um, and then I that was really useful for me because it you know I think a lot of if you only engage with the world through fiction,
Yeah.
uh, you you get a lot of blind spots. Like
Yeah.
um, like the number of times I look at a like a Frank Miller comic, and it's like the the weird like hulking knife wielding interracial group of muggers that like comes out of the shadows. I'm like, that's just not what it is. That's not, maybe that's how it was in New York in the 70s. I don't know, but that's not the real world right now. And I feel like it did a lot for me personally to understand that everybody had a different place they were coming from,
Right.
and um that I worked very menial jobs for very wealthy people, and I kind of saw the disparity there of how they see you,
Yeah.
and it made me think about how I see other people. So I have a very good tipper. That's one thing it's done for me. Um, and but it also meant that I can't look at a story with palaces and princesses and things without thinking about who's cleaning the chamber pots.
Right.
And not only do I think that's, morally right, whatever, I also think it's narratively interesting.
It
Though,
very much so.
yeah, like in Lavender Jack, where this was much more of a prevalent theme, our two basically our two main characters are Sir Memley Bastrop, the guy who is the titular Lavender Jack. He's a millionaire athlete inventor who's
Yep.
like the guy in the purple Lavender Jack suit doing vigilante things. And Ducky is the person who poses as his housemaid, who is, kind of the brains behind the operation, the strategist, and she gathers huge amounts of information just by talking to
Meeting
like other
staff and all
maids.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that's where that comes from.
Yep.
Me thinking that a world where you're only in either the palace or in dungeons
Right.
are like that's good. That's a good start. It's fun. But there's a whole like 18 floors in between where really interesting story can happen.
That's I think it just harken on that. One of the things that I love about sci-fi generally is not the monster tales, because I feel like humans are better monsters. Just our relationship dynamics and the way we throw class into everything and all the stuff that comes around with being in a society. I think
Right.
that's way more interesting than just, and obviously I love Godzilla. So it's
Mhm.
always good to have your beast, or what you have to beat your Leviathan, etc. But yeah, going through all those relationships and the humanities and the elements and the way we are cruel to each other and nice to each other as well and uplifting. Those are the stories. And so
Yeah.
so happy that you dig into that intentionally.
Well, and what's better than encountering somebody that you're ready to hate and it turns out they're cool?
Yeah.
Um, there's a famous instance in World War One, whereas these Allied and German soldiers, in the middle of I don't want to say the country because I'm gonna get it wrong, but on Christmas Day there was a truce. There was because they were
Yeah.
like 100 yards from each other, like they were right there, and it was just like, can we just be bros for 8 hours, then we'll go back to killing each other.
Yeah.
And there's something kind of beautiful about that, and sci-fi gives us an opportunity to engage in those stories kind of with the safety wheels on.
Right. Right. So Etta presently, I guess we can't spoil too much. One of the cool things I'll call out, cheesy call out here, marketing, I should say, promo. We can go 7 days in advance, up to 7 days in advance on Comics Kingdom. Like, so I can
Mhm.
read where Etta is, and I have seen where Etta is. What can we say about this character without revealing too much to these
Well,
audiences?
so Etta is, you know, she uh, she's a mechanic that Flash finds in the middle of this underground labyrinth he's been
Hmm.
transported to. He doesn't know where he is. He doesn't know how to get out. The only other beings he's encountered before he meets her are these sort of feral robots that are like
Hmm.
smashing each other and like dragging each other's bodies off into the dark. It's very menacing. It's very Mad God. And then he meets Etta, who is this woman in a protective sort of welder's
Yep.
jumpsuit with these sort of big manacled gloves and this helmet, this sort of diving helmet style thing that we find out she's locked into. I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to
No.
say that uh, she's just come from a place where your boss decides when you're done working, and that's when you get unlocked from your suit.
Yeah.
And so uh, she's stuck in this place with these cannibal robots, uh, you know, kind of thinking she's going to die in an outfit that somebody else locked her into. And obviously, there's metaphors that can be read into that. But I really like this character. People have pointed out that she's basically Maggie from Love and Rockets, and that's true. She is basically Maggie the mechanic. Um, but it's because I knew Flash was going to get stuck with her for a while, for a couple of weeks. And I thought, okay, if they don't work, if they don't have chemistry, then this whole storyline won't work.
Yeah.
And nobody has more chemistry than Maggie. But no, she's kind of like Dale, kind of like Boach. She's an ordinary person who's been put in this extraordinary circumstance. Yeah. And that's where Flash shines. Flash takes people that have been put beyond their comfort zone, put in danger, and invites them to envision a world where they aren't the victim of this circumstance, but somebody who will survive and grow from it.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, hell of a comparison. If anyone's compared to Love and Rockets, and that's, to me, that's a win. So
yeah, I'm wearing that.
Yes. So again, for audiences that haven't read, or if you're in the midst of reading, I hope you enjoy the storyline and continue going through, obviously, Etta's reveal and where everything is going in that. And a reminder, you can jump ahead if you subscribe to Comics Kingdom, and you can if you can't wait for the daily releases, for that matter. Before I let you go here, I do want to engage in a fun little lightning round of questions on Flash. And before we even get into that, I've already revealed my favorite, the Margrave strip. It was the original Ming panel for the longest, just our Sunday and his war on that was. But that I fell in love with that Margrave battle scene, and that's my moment. That's my strip, right?
That's so cool to hear. Thank you.
If you could, what is your favorite strip?
From what I've done?
From what you've done, yeah.
Well, the strip where Flash helps Boach escape from the prison, I really like that one. My mom actually bought a print of it off of Comics Kingdom.
Did she?
Has that. Yeah. But actually, the one that I really like, I mean, there's a couple that I like a lot. A lot of the ones that are a little more contemplative, because while it is a very action-heavy strip, there's stuff that's very interior. There's one early on where Flash is he stepped away from a party, heavy thing just happened. He's trying to collect himself, and he sees this this giant shape under a tarp in this palace room, and he pulls the tarp, and it's one of the old statues of Ming, and he's just like, we're not really in his head per se in that moment, but we just see him kind of look at it and reckon with, like, well, he's gone, but there's so much of him left. Yeah. There's so much of this world left, and we don't even know for sure that he's gone. Like, it's just Flash kind of taking a moment to understand how far from over everything is. And I don't know, I just think the art's good. Like, I like what that says about him when no one's watching him.
Yeah. That's a great one. That is a great one. That actually made me light bulb moment right now, or question. Are we ever going to see pre-Flash? Like, does he ever think about what it was before he was where he is? Yeah. And just like randomly, when I was a kid, pre-Flash.
I have something I'm working on, a storyline I'm pretty excited about, because we don't know much about Flash's backstory in my version of the strip.
Right.
I keep the fact that he's a polo player from Yale.
Right.
I just like that from the original. And in the original strip, he also plays football when he's at school, but he's a professional polo player. And it's a weird thing to be. So I decided to keep that. And we know that he was close with his grandfather, because he makes several references to that. I have a story where we'll go into that a little bit more, that I think people will really like.
That'll be really, really fun. All right, so here, the lightning round. So right at the top, favorite non-Flash pulp hero?
The Spider, 100%.
Really?
Yeah.
I expect you to say the Shadow.
I mean, I love the Shadow. The Spider is like the Shadow if the Shadow was like a Better Call Saul character. Like the Spider, he's nasty and gnarly, but he's also very, very human. The Spider's my guy.
Forgive me. Have you ever as I've seen on obviously on Instagram, you take some time and you've drawn. Have you drawn the spider? Have you just for
I
the heck of it?
I've drawn the spider a number of times. He looks exactly like the shadow.
Okay.
So sometimes people think I'm doing one when I'm doing the other. He was created as just like Flash Gordon was created as an
Yep.
answer to Buck Rogers, the spider was created as an answer to the shadow. And by the way, if I ever got the chance to work on the shadow, I would love that. I would love to do this like David Simon, the Wire version of the shadow.
Yeah.
But yeah, just something about that weird, creepy spider guy with his horrible like old lady wig and his ring that he brands people with. Yeah, that's my guy.
All right. Next one. Dream crossover with King Features character.
I mean,
Oh,
it's
within the King Features universe. It doesn't have to be a character.
well, I hope maybe at some point in the future we can do kind of a Defenders of the Earth
Oh, that'd
thing
be
with
fun.
Margrave, Lothar, and the Phantom. But who I think would be really cool to cross Flash over with is Prince Valiant.
Oh yeah.
I would love to do a little bit of a. I mean, I like time travel stories. I think it would be interesting to try a couple different ways that maybe we could get those two together. I would love to see Flash in like Arthurian gear. I think Val on Mongo would be really interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, that I think that would be in terms of the King Features catalog. I think that would be
That
really
actually would be a
cool.
lot of fun, and I'd love to see. I know we talked about that briefly, Flash and Camelot. I'd love to see Dale and Camelot and see how she ingests all of that.
Yeah.
Like, that would be really, really, really fun.
Well, I'd love to do like Dr. Zarkov has to like look at the stars and calculate where they are back. Like there's just so much cool stuff we could do because like the three Flash Gordon main characters and Bach gets to come to, you can drop them anywhere and they can have an adventure. And I
Yeah.
think like Camelot would be a really cool. And then just it would be such an excuse to break out all of my Prince Valiant collections with the king among kings, Hal Foster. So yeah, Prince Valiant.
All
My
righty.
lightning is very slow,
No,
apparently.
no, 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 no. This is fine. I like it this way as well. Instead of us like bap, 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 bap. What uh, what gadget do you wish were real from the strip?
Ooh, in the fifth storyline of the first year, Mon Gothic, one of the Power Men. I love the Power Men. They're like these super civil servants that make the city run. They're like if I like making working class characters, like these guys are like the Avengers of working class heroes, and they help Flash escape from the cops essentially, and they give him this pro solar multi tool, which is it's like a sonic screwdriver. It unlocks things. It has a defensive function. It's got like a telescope in it. It's got all these gizmos, and it's funny. It's called the Pro Solar Multi Tool because Maggie is a pro solar or is trying to be a pro solar mechanic in the first years of Love and Rocket. So I guess the Hernandez is all over the strip. But yeah, that would be great. I would just love a tool that can do anything that I can keep on my belt and also kind of looks like a lightsaber. Dope.
Yeah, yeah, why
Yeah.
not? That is an easy win, right? What I think we teased this a little bit before we spoke about it. What is the panel you're the most proudest of?
Well, there's a lot of panels that I like a lot in the series that have different things going for them. But there's a panel we did in I think maybe December of this year during the Lion Men arc where uh, Dale and Flash are in the Lion Man caravan. They're heading down the coast on this sojourn, and it's kind of our vacation storyline a little
Hmm.
bit. They get to relax from the events of last year, and there's a strip where they're just having like a nighttime picnic on this bluff overlooking the beach, and Dale leans down to kiss Flash. I just think it looks really nice. I think I did a nice job of it. I because that's the thing about being an artist, especially a cartoonist who like at this point I've drawn Flash. I've drawn 600 strips, and Flash is in like maybe 1.5 panels per strip. So I've drawn him about 1,000 times now. It's never going to be like the big moments that stick out to you. It's always going to be like the tiny things
Yeah.
that you nail. That's, I don't know, just something about that. Romance scenes can really look dumb very quickly if you're not careful, and it was just the way I wanted it to be. So that's what comes to mind.
Oh, that's great. Well, that's great. Again, Dan, it's such a pleasure to talk to you and geek out here on Flash Gordon. One from the source. I do love the Defenders idea. I'm very excited for the future of Flash and for the King properties and our universe for that matter. Um, Before we let everyone go, obviously I want to remind our audiences that Flash Gordon is available daily on Comics Kingdom, also newspapers nationwide, and on your site. I believe in danschkade.com. Correct.
Oh
I don't
yeah.
know why. I don't know why I was going to go to your email there, but danschkade.com. And you can even start from the beginning there. I think you have that catalog there. So, which is a great way to catch up and see all of this amazing work. And if you haven't done so already, right? If you're here this long, I'm pretty sure you have. With that said, where can we find you on social media?
Well, I am on Instagram and Blue Sky at Dan Schkade. Uh, my last name isn't very old, so there's only like 1,000 of us. So I'm sort of just Dan Schkade everywhere. I on my Instagram I post like funny short comics, and then my Blue Sky is where I post a lot of Flash Gordon updates and links to the daily strips. So that's where you can find me.
Oh, that's great. Of course, you know how to find Comics Kingdom, also Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, etc., and YouTube, and here at comicskingdom.com. Stay tuned to next week's episode as well, because we're gonna have Jim Keefe on, who is also part
Oh,
of Flash Gordon, the Flash Gordon lore and universe. We'll be talking Sally Forth, but there's natural conversations that are going to be bridged there. So we look forward to
the
that
man.
conversation. But with that said, thank you for joining us on Inside the Kingdom, and enjoy Flash Gordon.